South Ossetia. Tskhinvali Region is a partially recognized state in the South Caucasus, located in the territory of the South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast within the former Georgian SSR. Its population of 53,000 lives in an area of 3,900 square kilometers south of the Russian Caucasus, with 30,000 living in its capital city of Tskhinvali. South Ossetia declared independence from Georgia in 1990, calling itself the Republic of South Ossetia. The Georgian government responded by abolishing South Ossetia's autonomy and trying to re-establish its control over the region by force. The crisis escalation led to the 1991–92 South Ossetia War. Georgian fighting against those controlling South Ossetia occurred on two other occasions, in 2004 and 2008. The latter conflict led to the Russia-Georgia War, during which Ossetian and Russian forces gained full de facto control of the territory of the former South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast. In the wake of the 2008 South Ossetia War, Russia, followed by Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Nauru, recognized South Ossetia's independence. Georgia does not recognize the existence of South Ossetia as a political entity, including most of the area in its Tskhinvali region, under the administration of the Provisional Administrative Entity of South Ossetia. Georgia and a significant part of the international community consider South Ossetia to be occupied by the Russian military. South Ossetia relies heavily on military, political and financial aid from Russia. Russia does not allow European Union monitoring mission monitors to enter South Ossetia. South Ossetia, Transnistria, Nagorno-Karabakh, and Abkhazia are post-Soviet frozen conflict zones. History. Medieval and early modern period. The Ossetians are believed to originate from the Alans, a Sarmatian Iranian tribe. In the 17th century, Ossetians started migration from the North Caucasus to Georgia. Ossetian peasants, who were migrating to the mountainous areas of the South Caucasus, often settled in the lands of Georgian feudal lords. The Georgian king of the Kingdom of Kartli permitted Ossetians to immigrate. According to Russian ambassador to Georgia Mikhail Tatishchev, at the beginning of the 17th century there was already a small group of Ossetians living near the headwaters of the Greater Lyagvi River. In the 1770s there were more Ossetians living in Kartli than ever before. This period has been documented in the travel diaries of Johann Anton Goldenstadt, who visited Georgia in 1772. The Baltic German explorer called modern North Ossetia simply Ossetia, while he wrote that Kartli was populated by Georgians and the mountainous areas were populated by both Georgians and Ossetians. Goldenstadt also wrote that the northernmost border of Kartli is the major Caucasus Ridge. By the end of 18th century, the ultimate sites of Ossetian settlement on the territory of modern South Ossetia were in Kudaro, Greater Lyagvi Gorge, the Gorge of Little Lyagvi, Kasani River Gorge, Guda and Truso. The Georgian Kingdom of Kartli-Kakheti, part of which was the major territory of modern South Ossetia, was annexed by the Russian Empire in 1801. According to Georgian historian Roland Topchishvili, Ossetian migration to Georgian areas continued in the 19th and 20th centuries. When Georgia was part of the Russian Empire, and Ossetian settlements in Trialeti, Bohomy, Bakuriani and Kakheti emerged as well. South Ossetia as a part of the Soviet Union. Following the Russian Revolution, the area of modern South Ossetia became part of the Democratic Republic of Georgia. In 1918, conflict began between the landless Ossetian peasants living in Tskhinvali who were influenced by Bolshevism and demanded ownership of the lands they worked, and the Menshevik government-backed ethnic Georgian aristocrats, who were legal owners. Although the Ossetians were initially discontented with the economic policies of the central government, the tension soon transformed into ethnic conflict. The First Ossetian Rebellion began in February 1918, when 3 Georgian princes were killed and the land was seized by the Ossetians. The central government of Tiflis retaliated by sending the National Guard to the area. However, the Georgian unit retreated after they had engaged the Ossetians. Ossetian rebels then proceeded to occupy the town of Tskhinvali and began attacking ethnic Georgian civilian population. During uprisings in 1919 and 1920, the Ossetians were covertly supported by Soviet Russia, but even so, were defeated. Between 3,000 and 7,000 Ossetians were killed during the crushing of the 1920 uprising. According to Ossetian sources, ensuing hunger and epidemics were the causes of death of more than 13,000 people. The Soviet Georgian government, established after the Red Army invasion of Georgia in 1921, created an autonomous administrative unit for Transcaucasian Ossetians in April 1922 under pressure from KAV Bureau, called the South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast. Some believe that the Bolsheviks granted this autonomy to the Ossetians in exchange for their help in fighting the Democratic Republic of Georgia, and favoring local separatists. Since this area had never been a principality before, the drawing of administrative boundaries of the South Ossetian was quite a complicated process. Many Georgian villages were included within the South Ossetian despite numerous protests by the Georgian population. While the city of Tskhinvali did not have a majority Ossetian population, it was made the capital of the South Ossetian. In addition to parts of Gori-Uy-Zd and Dushat-Uy-Zd of Tiflis Governorate, parts of Racha-Uy-Zd of Kutaisi Governorate were also included within the South Ossetian. According to Georgian historians, all these territories historically had been indigenous Georgian lands. Although the Ossetians had their own language, Russian and Georgian were administrative, state languages. Under the rule of Georgia's government during Soviet times, it enjoyed minority cultural autonomy, including speaking the Ossetian language and teaching it in schools. In 1989, 2/3 of Ossetians in the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic lived outside the South Ossetian. Historical Ossetia in the North Caucasus did not have its own political entity before 1924, when the North Ossetian Autonomous Oblast was created. Tensions in the region began to rise amid rising nationalism among both Georgians and Ossetians in 1989. Before this, the two communities of the South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast of the Georgian SSR had been living in peace with each other except for the 1918 to 1920 events. Both ethnicities have had a high level of interaction and high rates of intermarriage. Disputes surrounding the presence of the Ossetian people in the South Caucasus has been one of the causes of conflict. Although the Georgian historiography believes that Ossetian mass migration to the South Caucasus began in the 17th century, Ossetians claim to be residing in the area since ancient times and that present-day South Ossetia is the historical homeland. No evidence exists to back up the Ossetian claims of being indigenous to South Ossetia. Some Ossetian historians accept that the migration of Ossetian ancestors to modern South Ossetia began after the Mongol invasions of the 13th century. While one South Ossetian de facto foreign minister in the 1990s admitted that the Ossetians first appeared in the area only in the early 17th century, since it was created after the Russian invasion of 1921. South Ossetia was regarded as artificial creation by Georgians during the Soviet era. The South Ossetian Popular Front was created in 1988. On 10 November 1989, the South Ossetian Regional Council asked the Georgian Supreme Council to upgrade the region to the status of an autonomous republic. The decision to transform the South Ossetian now into the South Ossetian ASSR by the South Ossetian authorities escalated the conflict. On the 11th of November, this decision was revoked by the Georgian parliament. The Georgian authorities removed the first party secretary of the oblast from his position. The Georgian Supreme Council adopted a law barring regional parties in summer 1990. Since this was interpreted by South Ossetians as a move against Ademinikas, they declared full sovereignty as part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics on 20 September 1990. Ossetians boycotted subsequent Georgian parliamentary elections and held their own contest in December. In October 1990, the parliamentary elections in Georgia was won by Zavir-Gamsakh-Erdia's Round Table Bloc. On the 11th of December 1990, Zavir-Gamsakh-Erdia's government declared the Ossetian election illegitimate and abolished South Ossetia's autonomous status altogether. Gamsakh-Erdia rationalized the abolition of Ossetian autonomy by saying, "They have no right to a state here in Georgia. They are a national minority. The homeland is North Ossetia. Here they are newcomers." When the Georgian parliament declared a state of emergency in the territory of South Ossetia now on 12 December 1990, troops from both Georgian and Russian interior ministries were sent to the region. After Georgian National Guard was formed in early 1991, Georgian troops entered Tskhinvali on 5 January 1991. The 1991–92 South Ossetia War was characterized by general disregard for international humanitarian law by uncontrollable militias, with both sides reporting atrocities. Although initially the Soviet military reportedly facilitated a ceasefire as ordered by Mikhail Gorbachev in January 1991, later they were participating in the conflict on the Ossetian side. In March and April 1991, Soviet interior troops were reported actively disarming militias on both sides and deterring the inter-ethnic violence. Zavir-Gamsakh-Erdia asserted that the Soviet leadership was encouraging South Ossetian separatism in order to force Georgia not to leave the Soviet Union. Despite the use of such tactics by Gorbachev, Georgia still declared its independence in April 1991. As a result of the war, about 100,000 ethnic Ossetians fled the territory and Georgia proper, most across the border into North Ossetia. A further 23,000 ethnic Georgians fled South Ossetia to other parts of Georgia. Many South Ossetians were resettled in uninhabited areas of North Ossetia from which the Ingush had been expelled by Stalin in 1944, leading to conflicts between Ossetians and Ingush over the right of residence in former Ingush territory. On 29 April 1991, the western part of South Ossetia was affected by an earthquake which killed 200 and left 300 families homeless. In late 1991, dissent was mounting against Gamsakh-Erdia in Georgia due to his intolerance of critics and attempts to concentrate political power power. On the 22nd of December 1991, after a coup d'etat, Gamsakh and his supporters were besieged by the opposition, which was backed by the National Guard, in several government buildings in Tbilisi. The ensuing heavy fighting resulted in over 200 casualties, and left the center of the Georgian capital in ruins. On the 6th of January, Gamsakh and several of his supporters fled the city for exile. Afterwards, the Georgian Military Council, an interim government, was formed by a triumvirate of Jabario Seliani, Tengiz Kitovani and Tengiz Sigwa, and, in March 1992, they invited Eduard Shevardnadze, a former Soviet minister, to come to Georgia to assume control of the Georgian State Council. On the 24th of June 1992, Shevardnadze and the South Ossetian government signed the Sochi ceasefire agreement brokered by Russia. The agreement included obligations to avoid the use of force, and Georgia pledged not to impose sanctions against South Ossetia. The Georgian government retained control over substantial portions of South Ossetia, including the town of Akhalgori. A joint peacekeeping force of Ossetians, Russians and Georgians was established. On the 6th of November 1992, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe set up a mission in Georgia to monitor the peacekeeping operation. For then until mid-2004, South Ossetia was generally peaceful. Following the 2003 Rose Revolution, Mikhail Saakashvili became the president of Georgia in 2004. Ahead of the 2004 parliamentary and presidential elections, he promised to restore the territorial integrity of Georgia. During one of his early speeches, Saakashvili addressed the separatist regions, saying, "Either Georgia nor its president will put up with disintegration of Georgia. Therefore, we offer immediate negotiations to our Abkhazian and Ossetian friends. We are ready to discuss every model of statehood by taking into consideration their interests for the promotion of the future development." Since 2004, tensions began to rise as the Georgian authorities strengthened their efforts to bring the region back under the rule. Georgia sent police to close down a black market, which was one of the region's chief sources of revenue, selling foodstuffs and fuel smuggled from Russia. This was followed by fighting by Georgian troops and peacekeepers against South Ossetian militiamen and freelance fighters from Russia. Hostage takings, shootouts and occasional bombings left dozens dead and wounded. A ceasefire deal was reached on the 13th of August, though it was repeatedly violated. The Georgian government protested against the allegedly increasing Russian economic and political presence in the region and against the uncontrolled military of the South Ossetian side. It also considered the peacekeeping force to be non-neutral and demanded its replacement. Joseph Biden, Richard Lugar, and Mel Martinez sponsored a resolution accusing Russia of attempting to undermine Georgia's territorial integrity and called for replacing the Russian manned peacekeeping force operating under CIS mandate. According to U.S. Senator Richard Lugar, the United States supported Georgia's call for the withdrawal of Russian peacekeepers from the conflict zones. Later, EU South Caucasus envoy Peter Semneby said that Russia's actions in the Georgia Spiro have damaged its credibility as a neutral peacekeeper in the EU's Black Sea neighborhood. 2008 war tensions between Georgia and Russia began escalating in April 2008. South Ossetian separatists committed the first act of violence when they blew up a Georgian military vehicle on the 1st of August, wounding 5 Georgian peacekeepers. During the evening, Georgian snipers retaliated by attacking the South Ossetian border checkpoints. Ossetian separatists began shelling Georgian villages on the 1st of August, with a sporadic response from Georgian peacekeepers and other fighters in the region. On the 7th of August, Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili ordered a unilateral ceasefire at about 7 p.m. Georgia launched the large-scale military operation against South Ossetia during the night of 7 to 8 August 2008. According to the EU fact-finding mission, 10,000–11,000 soldiers took part in the general Georgian offensive in South Ossetia. The investigators found that none of the explanations given by the Georgian authorities in order to provide some form of legal justification for the attack were valid, and that it is not possible to accept that the shelling of Tskhinvali with Grad multiple rocket launchers and heavy artillery would satisfy the requirements of having been necessarily and proportionate. The official reason given by Tbilisi for this was to restore constitutional order in the region. After the heights around Tskhinvali were secured, Georgian troops with tanks and artillery support entered the town. Georgian shelling left parts of Tskhinvali in ruins. According to Russian military commander, over 10 Russian peacekeepers were killed on the 8th of August. That day Russia officially sent troops across the Georgian border into South Ossetia, claiming to be defending both peacekeepers and South Ossetian civilians. Russia accused Georgia of committing genocide. Russian authorities claimed that the civilian casualties in Tskhinvali amounted up to 2,000. These high casualty figures were later revised down to 162 casualties. In 5 days of fighting, the Russian forces captured Tskhinvali, pushed back Georgian troops, and largely destroyed Georgia's military infrastructure using airstrikes deep inside the Georgia proper. Russian and Abkhaz forces opened a second front by attacking the Kidori Gorge, held by Georgia. After the retreat of the Georgian forces, the Russians temporarily occupied the cities of Poti, Gori, Sanaki, and Zugdidi. Both during and after the war, South Ossetian authorities and a irregular militia conducted a campaign of ethnic cleansing against Georgians in South Ossetia, with Georgian villages around Tskhinvali being destroyed after the war had ended. The war displaced 192,000 people, and while many were able to return to their homes after the war, a year later around 30,000 ethnic Georgians remained displaced. In an interview published in Kommersant, South Ossetian leader Eduard Kokoiti said he would not allow Georgians to return. Through mediation by President of France Nicolas Sarkozy, the parties reached a ceasefire agreement on the 12th of August. On the 17th of August, Dmitry Medvedev announced that Russian forces were to begin withdrawal on the next day. On the 8th of October, Russian forces withdrew from the buffer zones adjacent to Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The control of the buffer zones was handed over to the EU monitoring mission in Georgia. Russia recognized Abkhazia and South Ossetia on the 26th of August. In response, the Georgian government cut diplomatic relations with Russia. Since the war, Georgia has maintained that Abkhazia and South Ossetia are under Russian occupation and remain legally part of Georgia. Geography and climate. South Ossetia is in the very heart of the Caucasus at the juncture of Asia and Europe, and it occupies the southern slopes of the Greater Caucasus mountain range and the foothills part of the Kartalan Valley. South Ossetia is a very mountainous region. The Liki Range is roughly in the center of South Ossetia, and the plateau that's also roughly in the center of South Ossetia is called Iberia. The Greater Caucasus mountain range forms the northern border of South Ossetia with Russia, and the main roads through the mountain range into Russian territory lead through the rocky tunnel between South and North Ossetia and the Daryal Gorge. The rocky tunnel was vital for the Russian military in the 2008 South Ossetia War because it is the only direct route through the Caucasus Mountains. South Ossetia covers an area of about 3,900 square kilometers, separated by the mountains from the more populous North Ossetia and extending southwards almost to the Tskhinvali River in Georgia. More than 89% of South Ossetia lies over 1,000 meters above sea level, and its highest point is Mount Kalatsa at 3,938 meters above sea level. Nearby Mount Kazbek is 5,047 meters, and it is of volcanic origin. The region between Kazbek and Shkara along the main Caucasus Range is dominated by numerous glaciers. Out of the 2,100 glaciers that exist in the Caucasus today, approximately 30% are located within Georgia, which South Ossetia forms a part of. The term Lesser Caucasus Mountains is often used to describe the mountainous areas of southern Georgia that connected to the Greater Caucasus mountain range by the Liki Range. The overall region can be characterized as being made up of various interconnected mountain ranges and plateaus that do not exceed 3,400 meters in elevation. Most of South Ossetia is in the Kura Basin, with the rest of it in the Black Sea Basin. The Liki and Racha ridges act as divides separating these two basins. Major rivers in South Ossetia include the Greater and Little Lyakvi, Kaysani, Medjuda, Blidin, Canal Sultanis, Ptsa River, and host of other tributaries. South Ossetia's climate is affected by subtropical influences from the east and Mediterranean influences from the west. The Greater Caucasus Range moderates the local climate by serving as a barrier against cold air from the north, which results in the fact that, even at great heights, it is warmer than in the northern Caucasus. Climatic zones in South Ossetia are determined by distance from the Black Sea and by altitude. The plains of eastern Georgia are shielded from the influence of the Black Sea by mountains that provide a more continental climate. The foothills and mountainous areas experience cool, wet summers and snowy winters, with snow cover often exceeding 2 meters in many regions. The penetration of humid air masses from the Black Sea to the west of South Ossetia is often blocked by the Liki mountain range. The wettest periods of the year in South Ossetia generally occur during spring and autumn, while the winter and summer months tend to be the driest. Elevation plays an important role in South Ossetia, where climatic conditions above 1,500 meters are considerably colder than in any lower-lying areas. The regions that lie above 2,000 meters frequently experience frost even during the summer months. The average temperature in South Ossetia in January is around +4 degrees Celsius, and the average temperature in July is around +20.3 degrees Celsius. The average yearly liquid precipitation in South Ossetia is around 598 millimeters. In general, summer temperatures average 20 degrees Celsius to 24 degrees Celsius across much of South Ossetia, and winter temperatures average 2 degrees Celsius to 4 degrees Celsius. Humidity is relatively low, and rainfall across South Ossetia averages 500 to 800 millimeters per year. Alpine and highland regions have distinct microclimates, though. At higher elevations, precipitation is sometimes twice as heavy as in the eastern plains of Georgia. Alpine conditions begin at about 2,100 meters, and above 3,600 meters snow and ice are present year-round. South Ossetia's economy is primarily agricultural, although less than 10% of South Ossetia's land area is cultivated. Cereals, fruit and vines are the major produce.
Forestry and cattle industries are also maintained. A number of industrial facilities also exist, particularly around the capital, Tskhinvali.